Hi, I'm Paige Detman, Chief Education Evangelist for Meteor Education. Today we're going to talk about preparing students for a world we can't imagine, a rapidly changing, increasingly complex, and technologically advanced world. Our conversation is going to connect neuroscience research about how students learn with the design of innovative learning experiences. We're going to explore how learner-centered classrooms and schools harness the power of the social brain and foster authentic student engagement. And since space has an impact on learning, we'll look at planning and design that help shape learner interaction and cultivate the social brain. We've all seen classrooms like this filled with lifeless learners looking at the back of the head of the person in front of them. These kids are stuck in a one-way pathway of information from the textbook and teacher into their brains. We pour the information in and hope, a big hope, that it's going to stick in memories. What we know from research is that information students memorize and retell usually stays in short-term memory for as long as the test, and then it just flies out. Rote learning rarely makes it to long-term memory. For the record, this is a real high school, real kids, real class. There's no play acting here. This is the way learning was for them. It goes without saying that their social brains aren't activated. Actually, their analytical brains aren't activated either. In classes like this, students learn to play the quiet and still game, which definitely isn't preparing these learners for citizenship and work in our rapidly changing world. Fast forward 1 year. These are the same kids in the same school a year later. Classrooms were remodeled, newly installed furniture, and sophisticated technology were purposefully included for collaborative tasks. A new way of learning is activating the social brains of these learners every day. A key to this transformation is providing teachers and administrators with job-embedded coaching to help them see their work differently. As a result, students are learning differently. In these learner-centered classrooms today, voices of excitement and collaborative conversations fill those formerly quiet classrooms and hallways. When the bell rings to go to the next class, teams of students linger, rapidly making final adjustments to their collaborative work task, having that last conversation about how they work together today before they move on to their adventure in the next class. During student interviews, some of the most powerful comments they made were how alone they felt in their old classes. They said learning was an individual activity and it wasn't that much fun. And more than anything, they felt that what they were learning wasn't really relevant to them. Today, they describe their classes as communities of learners where they care about one another. Their learning is challenging, it's relevant to their lives, and it's fun. The interactions they have with their teammates help them learn better, they say, because, their quote, we have more brains involved and we come up with better ideas together. These kids feel they're gaining valuable soft skills to prepare them for their futures. They talked about teamwork, collaboration, leadership, and organizing their work as a team. Probably the most significant reveal is their strong sense of belonging that they feel now with their peers in their classes. They say it's a result of the friendships made in collaborative teamwork with their peers. That appears to be the greatest change noted, is they're actually using their social brains in learning now, and that makes a difference for their interest and motivation. So what do we mean by our human social brain? The social brain is a natural part of every human, and it awakens as a newborn baby. Starting as infants, our natural human nature is to seek connections with others in an effort to form relationships. Have you seen newborns watch the faces of their parents? Look at this mother and child to see how intently they're looking at one another. They watch the eye gaze, their eye gaze watches the face of one another. And even a few hours after birth, infants can imitate their parents' facial expressions. Think about how we sometimes stick out our tongue at a baby and we're so delighted when they stick out their tongue back at us. At just a couple of months old, babies focus their eye gaze on faces as a form of communication with their parents or caregivers. What is interesting is how this parent and baby relationship plays out through our social brains. When my daughter's little ones were babies and they cried or they smelled, as all babies do, she ran toward them as fast as she could rather than running away. And she was so happy to be able to go to them. Her actions highlight our natural desire to connect and bond with others. In recent years, neuroscientists have made impressive links between the social brain and human life. Through this research, we've learned a couple of things: that social interactions drive us, and social connections boost our well-being. Look at the eye gaze of these girls and how it mimics the gaze between mother and child. These students are experiencing the power of their social brains, and they're having a lively and passionate discussion that is only possible through the social context of their classroom. Matthew Lieberman, a social cognitive neuroscientist at UCLA, describes the power of our social brain in his book, Social: Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect. In his book, Lieberman talks about being socially connected is our brain's lifelong passion. His research findings are a little bit different than Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow postulates that our most basic human needs are physical: food, water, shelter, safety, security. Lieberman's research is showing that human social needs are the most critical for our survival. Lieberman says what we need more than anything to survive is social connection. In the book Social, Lieberman discusses how our social brain wiring makes it natural for us to want to share information with others. Along with that social interaction, he highlights that communication is a basic human need too. So for example, when we hear a great story, we immediately think about who we can share it with. That's just natural. These high schoolers have that same situation right now. One of them is sharing a funny with the others, and they're watching closely with their eyes to see the reaction of the peers to that funny story. Lieberman dedicates a part of his book to what he calls mentalizing. Lieberman's example of mentalizing is when we read a fiction book or we watch a movie, we actually try to enter the minds of one or more of those characters. What this means to us as humans is, in Lieberman's words, we have a profound proclivity towards trying to understand the thoughts and feelings bouncing around inside the skulls of people we interact with. Now that's a mouthful, but what he's saying is we're trying to understand what other people are thinking. Let's take that concept a step further. As we grow from childhood to adulthood, we continue studying the faces and gestures of others. An important part of human survival is embedded in our ability to pay attention to the environments where we are, and then to interpret the actions of others within those environments. This is our centuries-old assessment of danger and safety. In classrooms, Lieberman's mentalizing is constantly happening with peers. See how these learners are intently looking into one another's eyes? What we see is our natural social nature of looking into the minds of others, peering into those minds to try and determine what they're thinking, feeling, doing, and about to do. Even unconsciously, students watch their peers as they are working together to try and figure out how they're going about their work. Bottom line, the social brain is ever present in our lives, yet it is an often unrecognized opportunity in today's K-12 schools. Take a look at these two groups of learners. Can you see their joint gaze on their learning task? They are collaboratively pooling their brains to seek information. Their eye gazes are moving from task to person as they try to figure out what the others are thinking, and then they communicate about that task that they're jointly creating. When learners follow the actions of their peers with their eyes, they interpret meaning, they make meaning from the information they're taking in. This is the foundation and what humans naturally have the ability to do: communicate and collaborate. That's part of our natural human nature. Learning happens through social and cognitive stimulation with our peers. Just starting as youngest learners, we develop language and problem-solving skills through conversation and through play. At the same time, these kids are gaining an awareness of the thoughts, emotions for sure, and viewpoints of their playmates. The young learners in these photos look happy, and it's clear to see their attention is focused on the task and each other, just like the older students a couple of photos back. These kiddos are gaining valuable social and interpersonal skills as they share their toys and their tools. They work together to build, to cook, and problem solve as a group. There aren't any lifeless learners in these photos, and generally there aren't in our early childhood classes. We encourage this young learner thinking and reasoning with open-ended questions for each team of creators, such as, what would happen if? What makes your tower strong? What might make your tower topple over? What happens when you add water? Who knows? This play could well set these youngsters on their way to a future as architects, structural engineers, and food scientists. Experiential learning that we care about helps us start over when the block tower falls, motivates us to stir up another batch of cookies when that first batch looks like mud and not like grandma's. This experiential learning helps us build perseverance at an early age. Just like our high schoolers in the first story, learners who teach one another learn better than when they study individually. Another aspect of Lieberman's research shows that this is because our social brain network learns better with peers than our analytical brain network learns spending solo time memorizing content for a test. Schools play an important role in helping students become even more human in an increasingly human world. We take a look at the photos on this page, and we know that students won't be able to compete with robots, and they shouldn't have to. Strong learner foundations include gaining human skills of teamwork, communication, collaboration, trustworthiness, and relationship building. And that's what these kids are doing in these photos. As the world itself becomes more human, schools benefit from harnessing the social brains of learners. We maximize learning in classrooms that invite social interaction. Dr. Patricia Kuhl, co-director of the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences at the University of Washington, tells us, the power of the social brain has been totally underestimated. It is a driving force in learning. It is the gateway to cognition. In these photos, we see through the eye gaze of learners and their collaborative work together, the gateway to cognition. The most powerful learning happens when experiential tasks are embedded in social interaction within that social context of the classroom. Experiential learning is simply learning by doing. It's how these students are learning in these photos. They're forming questions, they're exploring, they're investigating, they're explaining their ideas to peers. That's that communication that is a natural part of who we are. And they're creating products of choice to show what they're learning. In each photo, we see student eye gaze on one another, on their materials, on their joint task. Of course, within this knowledge seeking, the investigations, and the project creation, is a lot of perseverance coming through, especially when things don't go right. That fosters the skill of negotiation between these team members as they try to figure out, where do we go wrong? And together they figure out how to get back on track. Within the nation's K-12 environment, there are several examples of schools maximizing the power of students' social brains. Gulf Coast Community Foundation's nationally recognized STEM Smart partnership with Sarasota County, Florida secondary schools, it led to significant transformation by changing the way teachers teach and the way students learn. Throughout the schools, students use their social brains on work teams every day. The focus on active, experiential, and collaborative learning happens along with the integration of sophisticated technology. And all of that links learning to real-world applications. You can see in this photo where the teacher is supporting the kids as they are looking at different substances and trying to use the background knowledge they've gained so far in this course to figure out what each substance is. It's exciting, and you can hear that collaborative hum of student voices in this photo when it's actually in a video. In Sarasota Middle School, students work together on teams over a period of time, say 4 to 6 weeks, to develop quality relationships. Relationships where kids feel a belongingness, sense of belongingness and trust, and where they gain teamwork skills. We found that team cohesiveness is a key to creating a safe space for learners to share their knowledge, their ideas, and their opinions one another. That relationship building opens kids to be willing to use their voice with their teammates. These team members work together for several weeks and they develop that trusting relationship to share their thinking. Through experiential learning, the kiddos ask questions and find answers as a collective team, using whatever tools they need for discovery. In fact, all of the tools, the technology tools and the science tools are located at individual team pods, not with the teacher. And that's how they have the opportunity to start to learn what tools in the real world would I use to solve this problem. Mark Pritchett, Gulf Coast Community Foundation's president and CEO, describes the STEM Smart initiative as a community investment in their children's futures. He told me, I never saw students having so much fun learning and teachers having so much fun teaching. We would walk in with a large group of community members, and the teachers and student teams were so engaged, they never even knew we were in their classroom. The excitement of learning was palpable. This is one of our business partners and program mentors who joined a campus tour with about 20, 25 other community members. He told me that in the first couple of classrooms they visited, he was sure the students were using scripts to impress the visitors. And as he continued to visit classes and came back on a couple more tours, he quickly realized his initial assumption was inaccurate. In fact, he became so supportive of the program that he became a mentor with kids. Here's
every kid at every workstation in every classroom was so engaged in what they were doing and collaborating with others and working so well together. Even though there was a tour going on and they had random strangers wandering through their classroom, they were still so directly focused and engaged on what they were doing and what they were learning that I almost couldn't believe it.
And that is the power of activating our students' social brains, the high level of engagement. An unintended outcome in Sarasota was a substantial decline in bullying, actually reported by students. They attributed this to the relationship building within their work teams. They said, we get to know one another so well in our classes by working with them every day that bullying just fades away. We can see by the photos here and in the last couple of slides that these middle schoolers are organized in collaborative work teams. And we talked about them staying together for a period of time, so they develop those really valuable relationships. Here, their attention is focused on their work, like Christian mentioned in his video, and they're actually having fun learning. Dr. Jennifer Mattu, a former Sarasota Middle School math teacher and instructional coach, talked about the safety that her students felt on their teams to challenge one another's thinking, which she said sparked mathematical connections that helped them gain real problem-solving skills. When I was a new principal, teachers would ask me how they could better engage their learners. We all ponder and read about student engagement. If we were in person in this conference, I would ask you to get into teams of 4 and define student engagement. And when we put those chart papers on the wall and we talk about them, it's likely that each group will have a different definition. Our research into engagement reveals 3 components of engagement that build on one another. The first component is relational engagement. We've been talking a lot so far about building quality, strong, and supportive relationships. That's because every educational experience is defined by relationships. This is due to our social brain that is most interested in self and self's place in the tribe. Relationships are the natural habitat where students cultivate their place in the tribe. As a powerful learning tool, our social brain helps students navigate their survival within the tribe every day, every space on campus. So how do students go about building productive relationships? Well, as we know, students don't naturally know how to develop those relationships, that sense of belongingness with peers. That's why teaching the skills of communication and collaboration are as important as teaching the skills of creative thinking and problem solving. One way we incorporate relationship building into daily collaborative tasks is through productive student conversations. What that means is we start with teaching kids how to build a respectful classroom with the way they speak to one another. For example, one of the things we teach is challenge or disagree with an idea, not the person who shared it. The next step in building productive student conversations is help students learn to look at evidence we've previously discovered, our background knowledge, and then to use it to build accurate knowledge. And then we move up to another level of communication and accountability, which is being able to show one another evidence to support a claim, challenge or disagree with one another in a respectful way, and engage in argumentation without arguing. So as students become more comfortable with one another and having those productive student conversations, they share the effort and thinking as a collective team to arrive at solutions. This relationship foundation for learning develops strength each day as the teams reflect on how well they work together. That's about a 5-minute piece before they leave to go to their next class. For example, how well did we hear the voice of every team member today? How well did we share evidence with one another? Were there any disagreements? And what skills did we use in resolving them? Now, what's our goal for tomorrow's work together as a team? The students in the photos on the left are building relationships. The kids on the couches are informally socializing, which is why it's so important throughout our schools to have places where kids can just gather and have casual conversations and start building those relationships. The photo on the right is a more formal learning experience. These kids are working together on a reading task. And look at how the one girl, is using her eye gaze to watch how the young man is recording what they've agreed to record on their joint task, that their joint product that they're going to share with the teacher. This is the power of collaborative work. And that's how we use our eye gaze and make meaning of what others are doing. The second level of engagement is cognitive. Cognitive engagement is when student brains make sense of the world and how things work. Building on their foundation of healthy relationships, student teams ask questions and they co-create and apply knowledge to solve problems. One of the key things in cognitive learning is the level of rigor that kids are engaged in, because our brains do need challenge. Our emotions and cognition focus together as one. They focus in tandem. We really can't separate them. So we have to make sure every activity has an emotional connection to our kiddos. Psychologist Mary Imordino Yang is clear that it's neurobiologically impossible for our brains to learn something we don't care about. And I'll give you a personal example. My husband and his friends love deer hunting. And so they have their deer stands, they talk about deer hunting. I cannot engage with him in learning about it and talking about it because I don't care and I don't enjoy eating deer meat either. So that's an example of how our brains, we need to care about what we're learning in order to make sense of it and make it relevant to us. So it pays for teachers to answer the why question for learners each day. Why are we learning this? How is it relevant to our lives? What does this matter to me and my future? Cognitive engagement connects an experiential task that is relevant to our kids within the social context of collaboration to foster deeper learning. Keys to successful cognitive learner-centered experiences are relevant real-world tasks, tasks that kids care about, learning that kids care about, making the content come to life for them. 2, challenging content. It's just like Goldilocks. Learners need just the right level of stimulation to cognitively engage their brains. If it's too easy, they don't want to engage. If it's too challenging, then they don't know that they can accomplish it, so their effort is less. but when it's at the just right level of rigor, they're willing to engage when they have their peers to support them in that learning process. And then collaborative teamwork that collectively engages the social brains in the learning experience is another key to cognitive engagement. These student teams in the science class are investigating a problem together using their choice of resources to gain knowledge and then analyzing their data collection together. And they told me that working together on their team makes them work more fun and actually makes their investigations more accurate. So activating social brains that has an emotional connection to the content is a way to deeper learning. That's cognitive engagement. The third component of engagement is agentic. Agentic engagement occurs when students feel so invested in their learning that they're willing to take ownership and responsibility of that work and of their progress. Students become inspired during agentic engagement to curate their own questions that spark their curiosity, the wonder and why inquiry. When their curiosity emerges, learners want to investigate further. Sage teachers accelerate this curiosity by removing themselves from the focus of learning and offering students the autonomy to lead their own investigations. Now, that's exactly what's happening in this example of student agency represented by the kids in this photo. This is a science and engineering class. Teams of 4 students are designing and building an elevator that will operate 3 stories high. Each team within this class has the autonomy to determine their own solutions to this challenge. This team of students excitedly told me how they're addressing the design challenge. They have given each one of themselves a leadership role. And while all of them collectively participate in all aspects of this project, each aspect has one student leader. Their roles, their leadership roles, are visionary designer, programmer, engineer planner, and historian. So together they acquire information through research and study, they're designing and building their structure, they're programming a motor to run the elevator up and down 3 stories, and they're keeping a historical journal. That's the role of the historian. That includes their research, their resources, their designs, their problem-solving steps, innovative ideas, missteps, and how they got around them, and successes. This team, when I was talking to them, they almost had their elevator up to the 3rd floor, and they were working and showing me how it was moving with that, using that motor. Their collective excitement overflowed as they talked to me about this innovation. That was using their collective voice. And they talked extensively about the choices they considered on how to solve this authentic problem. Our brains do need challenge, and that comes from the rigor inherent in a learning task, the choice that students have in the inquiry process, and their opportunity to use their voice and their choice in presenting their learning. This is agentic engagement. These 3 elements of engagement build on one another, and they become a flywheel of accelerating student engagement. First, learners develop strong and supportive relationships that opens them to use their voices. Next, on the flywheel, as it turns, is cognitive engagement of their minds through a humanized learning experience with an emotional connection to the content at the right level of rigor. Then last, learners experience the joy of curating questions that are of curiosity to them and seeking knowledge to add to what they know today. This is one turn of the flywheel, and each day we can turn the flywheel another turn and another turn. And as we turn that flywheel, when the kids get in their class and they begin their relationships with their social brains and they move into their cognitive learning, and then they become so excited, like those kids in Sarasota, that their agentic engagement kicks in and they delve deeper and deeper into the learning process. That flywheel can make a turn every single day. And what happens when it does that? It becomes harder for external influences to slow it. And here's an example. I was talking with a friend recently. This just came up, who was describing his fabulous kindergarten experience. He learned through active play every day, thriving through inquiry in an inviting classroom where he had safe relationships with his peers to collectively explore and discover how things work. As a dyslexic learner, his teacher actually helped him create his own story when the one he read out loud to her from the book was a different story than what was in the book. He said that opportunity and that experience where the teacher just helped him learn from the story that he read in his head that was profound to him. And he gained content meaning through experiential learning activities as he and his peers were continually discovering. Like he said, what happens when they need to get around a mud puddle after a hard rain to get back inside? Through these experiences, he gained social problem solving skills. And feeling constantly nurtured, Rob loved kindergarten, but more than that, he loved to learn and to explore. Now, first grade wasn't a very good experience for Rob. He didn't respond well or thrive in his new, very traditional and passive teacher-focused learning environment. In fact, his dyslexia hindered his progress that year, and the lack of enjoyment in learning dampened his passion to learn. However, the momentum of his flywheel was so strong that when he moved to a new school that was very much like his kindergarten year, his flywheel started turning again, and he regained his love for learning. With each turn from relational to cognitive to agentic, his engagement in learning accelerated. And Rob reflected that his kindergarten year of engagement gave him such a strong desire to discover that the external influences in first grade slowed but did not stop his flywheel from turning. And so that's how I look at accelerating student engagement with relational, cognitive, and agentic. Whether it makes one turn every day or it slows and doesn't turn very much for a little bit, once we fall in love with something, like Rob loved to investigate and find out, or me, for example, being an avid reader, it's very hard for external influences to stop or slow that flywheel of engagement. Purposefully triggering students' social brains does require planning and design consideration. Sarah Williams Goldhagen, author of Welcome to Your World, points out, there's no such thing as a neutral environment. Your built environment's either helping you or it's hurting you. And I love what she says, we must extract out what kind of design principles in the built environment will have an impact on how kids learn and behave. I believe that a school conceived around formal and informal collaboration is the key to engage learners and deeper learning. Most successful efforts include a strategic focus on broad-based community input centered on discovering a foundational educational vision for how the community desires kids to learn, and that forms the basis for school design. An example of engaging the community is NAC Architects, when they implemented a visioning process during pre-design with Mount Si High School community in Snoqualmie, Washington. Through this process, the community identified their foundational educational vision that included cultivating students' social and emotional well-being, interactions, and relationships. And then NAC correlated that vision directly with their planning and design for the new school. This is John Belcher, principal of Mount Si High School, and he explained the translation of that educational vision to the school design to his community by saying, we wanted flexible spaces that would adjust over the next 100 years of education. We wanted increased student collaboration, to move outside of a classroom, to have something that was truly learner-centered and not just adult-focused, to try interdisciplinary approaches, and to really meet the social and emotional needs of our students. Adding to that, Principal Belcher noted that they needed lots of opportunities for kids to spread out across the campus. Boris Sardar, NAC design principal for the project, describes the new Mount Si High School as a fabric of spaces throughout the campus, designed as the bedrock for building relationships through collaboration. According to Sardar, these photos in the slide show how informal socializing and formal learning spaces are distributed throughout the Mount Si campus. You can see in the top left photo a more formal learning environment with a breakout space, and then the open area where kids can go and gather during the day for informal and formal learning. And then on the right are the small areas that were designed as interdisciplinary collaboration areas. This was a key design tool that provided the desired student-centered atmosphere with a high degree of trusting social interaction. Forming small learning communities with different commons areas throughout resulted in that physical environment that encourages social emotional engagement, which was by the school community seen as paramount for student success, academic success. And then to create an atmosphere conducive to building those relationships and promoting social interaction, all spaces were organized for connection to the outside to gain as much natural light as possible. The design of these spaces reflects that school community desire for student-centered environments that help maximize learning through fostering strong peer-to-peer relationships. Other guiding design principles at Mount Si that Sardar told me about include prospect and refuge spaces that are integrated throughout the campus, both inside and out, actually. Physical connector spaces that allow socializing and learning to flow across campus. And those physical connector spaces have all kinds of breakout areas for the kids. Outdoor space design and landscape that accentuates nature to humanize the large campus that's actually 50% larger than the old one and provide opportunities for student interaction. Combined, these elements help shape learner interaction and cultivate the social brain. Sardar says, we know that space design has a significant impact on learning. And if we engage students both socially and academically, we will increase their sense of belonging to a place, which ultimately results in safer schools. When purposeful design works in harmony with engaging the social brains of our learners, the environment helps forge stronger long-term memories. Neuroscientists are clear that integrating social and cognitive learning within a social context is the key to better learning. This photo shows a classroom space working as a very engaging public plaza with a myriad of activities at the same time. Students have ample choices to select the right space for their learning purpose and their degree of focus that they need. The edges provide choices for small groups to engage in focused activity and discussions. And that central open area provides a variety of accommodations for more interactive team collaboration. The goal of schooling is to develop thriving learners that will be productive citizens in our modern, rapidly changing world. By taking a profoundly human approach to learning and supporting these initiatives with purposefully designed, affirming learning environments, schools can help youngsters reach their fullest potential to thrive in a world we can't yet imagine. Essentially, my friend Melina Unkeper, a social neuroscientist, says, learning is the residue of experience. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk with you this morning.